want to invite my partner in crime up here to harmonize with me on this.
Thank you, Forrest and Ryan. That was wonderful.
Thank you, congregation.
Yeah. Welcome to this gathering hosted by the Unitarian Universalist Church of Bowling Green. Whether you are here in person or online, we are glad that you are joining us. My name is Laura McGee, and I will be your service associate today. What a beautiful fall we are starting to have. I loved waking up yesterday morning and seeing the mist and going to the International Festival later, celebration of diversity in our community. It was just awesome. Yeah. Please set your cell phones to silent so that we can be fully present with one another. We are a welcoming congregation. Whoever you are, however you identify, wherever you come from, whoever you love, you are welcome here. Our Sunday services are different each week so that we can honor and learn from our wide array of traditions and beliefs. Today, our speaker is Timothy Diller. For Unitarian Universalists, the flaming chalice is a symbol of the light of learning and the love of our community. This morning, our chalice will be lit by Cynthia McGahan. Come on up, yeah. As our congregation's chalice is lit, please light your own chalice at home if you have one. Join us in singing Rise Up, O Flame.
Rise up, O flame, my light glowing, show us through division and joy.
Thank you, Cynthia. All right. So at this point, we have a reading in unison. And I'm hoping it'll show up on the screen here. Yes. Okay. I picked this one out for us to read in unison together, and it relates so closely to today's topic. So this is the fourth principle, and let's read together. A free and responsible search for the truth and meaning. Yes, our principle number 4. All right, at this point we have a hymn, and so if you all would lead us, please.
Yes, you can stand if you're willing or able. A lot of y'all don't know that Greg grew up playing in a country church, Cumberland Presbyterian, and he does these old gospel hymns in such a style. And I'm like, of course you've got to play for this. Of course you have to. And these two hymns that we're singing today were some of Tim's favorites. He remembers them from his childhood. Chances are we've never sung them here. But anyway, to the best of your ability, please rise up and sing with me, Nearer My God to Thee.
We're so pleased to be able to offer religious exploration for our young people. At this point, we will sing the children out to their RE. As the children go out, please remain seated as we sing them on their way with Go Now in Peace. will now have a few moments for meditation, reflection, and prayer. The singing bowl will lead us into silence. After the silence, you're invited to join in the song Spirit of Life. The words will be on the screen. I believe we now have a reading. Yes. So Fred Gott will lead us.
And we have, yes. This is a responsive reading, so I will read the bold print and the audience will read the italics. And the title is, We Do Not Forget Our Innocence. As we move through life, finding ourselves always do wise and do foolish, we ask that our mistakes be small and not hurtful. We ask that as we gain experience, we do not forget our innocence, for they are both part of the whole.
Thank you. So, we come to a very special moment. Normally it would be my task to introduce our speaker, and I'm going to keep that short because Timothy Diller is here today to tell you about his journey growing up Mennonite, his journey to us, to this church as his spiritual community. And I just want to say, as the service associate and service coordinator today, what a pleasure it was to work with him as he prepared so thoughtfully to speak to you all today. So, without losing any more words, welcome, Timothy.
Thank you. Excuse me. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Well, it's a beautiful day. First day of October. I hope hope everyone's enjoying it. This is the first I've done public speaking in a while, so hope you can bear with me while I get used to it. And I'm probably going to be reading a lot of it as well. I like to be able to just have bullet points and speak from that, but I'm probably going to read most of this morning. So I hope that I hope that works out well. I want to thank y'all for the privilege to tell my story. I have a lot of mixed feelings about it. It's on the one hand, it's been really an interesting life, and I want to share some of that with you. And we're gonna watch a few slides here. But on the other hand, it's had a lot of twisted experiences in it, and so I beg your understanding and support. Even though I find much of the religious teaching to be quite inconsistent with both itself and reality, it has a strong grip on my everyday life. I apologize, but I still struggle with some guilt just speaking to a church full of supposed infidels. However, I don't want to overburden you with my personal challenges. So let's dive in. I was born on January 4, 1978, on the Cumberland Plateau in Altamont, Tennessee. I was several weeks premature at a little under 5 pounds. My mother sneezed and her water broke, so that's how I came into this world. I spent the first 13 days under a billy light in the Chattanooga hospital. I have one brother and 4 sisters, of which I am the oldest. So I'm going to go through a handful of slides here. This is just a map to show kind of where Altamont is. The little blue circle there. It's about halfway between Chattanooga and Nashville. It's just on the plateau above, on the edge of the Cumberland Mountains. This here is it's where our farm was. You can see the main road come up around the stone quarry and up and snaked up around the mountain, and then our driveway was a mile long. It went back to our farm there. So that clearing there at the end of that drive is where I grew up. This is an aerial photo of our farm in the 80s when we lived there. Now, obviously, I don't have the rights to it, but that shows see the house there, and then the barn with the dairy farm, and this is the shop here, and so that's where I grew up. This is a close-up of the house. My father built that before he got married. So it was a nice, simple house, but so, excuse me, I didn't expect to tear up over it. But this is my father and my mother. That's myself. I just happened to blink whenever they took the picture there, so I wasn't sleeping. But so I was about 3 years. I was about 3 years old. My sister was two years younger. Hannah Beth. My father was Wayne, and my mother was Margaret. So this is I was about 5, and I thought this picture was kind of funny. My grandpa, Whitmer, had a Polaroid camera, and he was wanting to take a picture, and he was he was sitting real close to us, and I was calculating that for as close as he is, he'd have trouble getting me in the viewing angle. So I was leaning in to make sure I got in the picture. So I'm not sure if that's a tribute to how smart or ignorant or self-absorbed I was, but I thought it was funny. So that's a picture of about the mid-2000s. That shows our whole family there. So my father's in the my father's in the middle, and then my mother's to his right, and then it's my mother, and then I'm here, and then my next younger sister, Hannah Beth, and then Ernest, and Frida, and I'll mention her later. She passed away from complications of lupus when she was about 20. And then Alice and Melinda was the youngest. This is my grandpa Whitmer and my grandmother, and he was the intellectual in the family. If I inherited it from anywhere, it would be from him. He was always amazed at how powerful the human mind was. And this is my grandpap Diller and his 8 boys, of which my father was the oldest, Wayne. This is a more recent picture of my family and my brother's family about 5 years ago. This is a picture of the dairy barn where we milked our cows there in Altamont, Tennessee. It's actually the family that took over the farm after we were there, but it's still pretty similar. This is an aerial picture of the church house in Tennessee, in Altamont, Tennessee. This is the entrance, and it was, almost severely plain inside, just wood slatted benches. And that's a picture of when I was about 12 years old, after we moved to Kentucky. There's every variation of Amish and Mennonite. We were more Mennonite and spoke English, had cars, tractors, electricity, and telephones, but did not have TV or computers. My parents and grandparents were all dairy farmers, as were theirs for generations back. We raised a third of our own food, so we were busy with the garden. I often had to help with the weeding and lawn mowing. I remember first pushing the lawnmower when I was 5 or 6. It was fun at first. I remember we would buy a whole 20-bushel bin of Golden Delicious apples about this time of the year in the fall to can or freeze as applesauce. Obviously, that was one of our staple foods. We also ate a lot of peanut butter. That brings up another interesting memory. My mother shied away from sugar, so it was a bit difficult to find peanut butter without it. We finally found a manufacturer that had plain, crunchy, non-homogenized peanut butter, so we ordered a 55-gallon barrel of it. We shared it with the rest of the community as well. I had to start with the daily chores by the time I was 4 or 5 years old. My mother had severe migraine headaches, so that put more pressure on us children to do the housework. I remember as a preschooler dragging the kitchen benches out to the clothesline so I and my younger sister could hang the wash. I also remember me and my sibling getting our hands in the wringer washer a few times as we fed the clothes through. For some of you younger ones, you may not know how those old wringer washers work. But the washer is in the lower tub, and then you'd feed the clothes through the wringer rollers there to squeeze the water out. And if you got your hands in there, it'd pull you in, so you had to hit that emergency button on top to release you. When I turned 6, it was my job to make the soft-boiled eggs each morning. When I was 7, I had to start feeding the calves and help milk the cows morning and evening. We also sewed about half of our own clothes. Our family was a little unique from others in our community. My father wanted us to wear overalls. We would often sew them ourselves out of denim. My mother did the hard parts, but had me sew up the long seams on the legs and the straps. That is one thing I kind of enjoy about my upbringing, learning all kinds of practical skills. We had large families. I have about 85 first cousins on each side. This obviously gave us a sense of family. But in other ways, there was so much forced behavior that there wasn't actually real closeness. I often felt like I had no one to talk to. I enjoyed building electronic circuits from scratch and philosophy. There were very few people I could discuss that with. My grandparents had moved from more liberal Mennonite churches in Maryland and Ohio because they were concerned about the way most Mennonites were gradually losing their faith. In fact, the church at Altamont was only a few years old at the time and was made up of many other such families. As a result, we weren't allowed to associate much with my extended relatives up north because they were too liberal. But it turned out that my grandparents were too liberal for the church in Tennessee, and the bishop expelled them, so most of my grandparents' family on both sides, except for my parents, moved out of the Altamont community to start a new church about an hour away in Sparta, Tennessee. This put my grandparents and my uncles and aunts who went with them under the ban, so we weren't allowed much contact with them either. Not all Mennonites and Amish practiced the ban the same, but our church avoided eating at the same table, doing business, or having friendly conversations. This brings out the irony of Mennonite life. On the one hand, from the outside, it looks like they have real close-knit communities and families, but in reality, there is a lot of extreme fragmentation and tension within. It can literally feel like being an orphan in your own home. On the one hand, it was unique and even a bit idyllic. On the other hand, it was accomplished through extreme coercion and even torture. On the one hand, we were heavily indoctrinated to believe that we were among a very fortunate few that had the privilege to be born into good Christian homes. On the other hand, it seemed really strange that if our church was so good, why wasn't everyone Mennonite? We had Bible devotions every morning right after breakfast. My father would read a passage, and then we would discuss it a few minutes before we prayed and sang a couple songs. I enjoyed the discussions, but found some of the teachings quite wrong. How could Adam and Eve, eating fruit off a tree when they weren't supposed to, destroy their souls or deserve burning in hell forever? Why did Jesus have to be nailed alive to the cross to fix such a petty fault? How was it right for God to try to kill Moses because his wife wouldn't cut on his baby boy's genitals with a sharp stone? Why did God tell the children of Israel to kill all the women and children of their enemies, but then also make it a sin to kill? The way the Bible described God sounded like way too much separation between him and his creation. If I made something, I would consider it an extension of my own self. I would never punish it eternally just because it didn't quite do what I wanted. The only sin I thought deserved eternal hellfire is if someone figured out how to torture you in fire perpetually. None of the sins in the Bible seemed even half that bad. If God was so perfect, wouldn't he be even more fair and reasonable than I as a selfish young child? Why did it seem like the God of the Bible was actually more evil than myself? Most of these questions I couldn't really even ask, but when I really pressed them, my father would just tell me I would understand it better once I was older. I wish. I didn't know what the word holistic was back then, but I'm pretty sure I was thinking that way before I even started school. It seemed to me the universe has to mostly function as one whole or it would fall apart. Our church had their own school, which I started when I was 6 and enjoyed it for the most part. I feel like I got a good elementary education, but of course it was mixed with intense religious indoctrination as well. In 2nd grade, our school teacher explained original sin to us, that when the first person committed the smallest sin after God created Adam and Eve, it damned all of their posterity to hell forever, and that if Jesus hadn't died on the cross, we would actually go to hell. So I asked her, in real life, we call something good when it works and bad when it doesn't. If the smallest bad deed could do all that, wouldn't the first small good deed be even stronger and destine all of their posterity to heaven for eternity? Her answer was, that's not what the Bible says. That didn't sound very satisfying to me, but I was secretly proud of the fact that apparently she didn't find any real fault with my logic, or she would have gone into an explanation to counter me rather than giving such a flat, dismissive answer. My father enjoyed debating religion with others, especially the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Seventh-day Adventists. Even though I had some serious doubts, I was still impressed with how well he could debate everyone and show that our way was the most consistent. To this day, I still feel like the way I was raised was about as close to following a literal interpretation of the New Testament as any. My concern now is, of course, that the Bible itself isn't consistent with reality. At any rate, that's how I learned to debate, and I still enjoy it today. As a result of that, I have put a lot of thought into philosophy, proper social order, and ethics. My parents were strict disciplinarians. Some of that I appreciate, but much of it seemed extreme. It didn't necessarily matter how insignificant the practical consequences of the offense were. They would whip us just for disobeying until they broke our will. I remember once when I was 3 or 4, I got bored sitting still through 2 hours of church. I touched the boy's hair in the seat ahead of us. After a warning and a second offense, my father took me out behind the church and whipped me hard enough to severely bruise me. That brings me to another instance, a memorable instance. Right outside our church house at the entrance, we had 2 big oak trees. When I was about 5, my friends and I were playing with the acorns that fell from this tree. I learned that if you rubbed an acorn on a rock, it heated up. I was bursting with excitement about my discovery, running around, touching the other children's cheeks with the hot acorn, exclaiming about how mechanical energy could be converted to heat energy. I'm sure I didn't use that big of words, but something to that effect. I don't recall any of the other children complaining about my excitement, but my father grabbed me by the shoulder and told me to calm down. Apparently, I didn't contain myself well enough, because when we got home, my father whipped me really hard for not being reverent enough at church. I felt especially offended over that punishment compared to most, because it felt like not only an affront to my freedom, but to my personal pride and joy of discovery. How many boring physics classes do we force children to endure just because we beat the excitement out of their own peers who would have gladly taught it to them in the middle of their play? I can remember another time my little sister Frida was just barely a year old, and she didn't want to drink a full cup of milk, so my father whipped her. She fought him, so he hung her upside down by the feet with one hand and whipped her with a PVC pipe with the other until she was out of breath from screaming and was bloody on her seat. At the time, I was 10 years old and seriously considering asking him to whip me instead to stop him, but I chickened out. I still feel a little guilty for not doing more to protect her. Perhaps this speech can help make up for that. Therefore, I dedicate my presentation this morning to her memory. When I ask my father about that incident now, he says he can't remember it. That doesn't help me much. If you legitimately had to do something like that to your toddler, would you ever forget? I think the reason he doesn't remember it is because, although that was the worst, whippings half that bad were routine. I clearly remember when I was around 5 or 6, trying to make sure I didn't get more than one whipping a week, so I would be mostly healed from the last one. A second whipping on top of a bruised seat is unbearably painful, in case you didn't know. I and my brother both have large buttocks when nobody on either side of our family has them. If it's not genetic, was it our body providing protective tissue? As a straight man, I shouldn't show my butt in front of a gay audience. Just kidding. But in case you don't believe my story, I think I may be walking proof myself. My parents did make a little adjustment with my 2 youngest sisters, but that was as much because we had moved to a new church and they were aghast at how extreme the punishments were. This indicates to me that other Mennonite families were less severe. But I also remember other classmates coming to school limping occasionally, so we weren't the only ones either. When you see all those perfectly behaved Mennonite children, think twice about what's actually going on. When I was 11 years old, almost out of nowhere, I felt this strong, threatening urge come over me, insisting that I needed to commit my life to God or I would go to hell if I died. I was caught off guard. We were taught that God didn't call us until we were in our teens, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I clearly felt God telling me that He wanted me to commit my life to Him and serve as a missionary in a third world country until I was totally worn out from the pain and exhaustion of it. I didn't know where this urge came from because it wasn't something that I had rationalized, nor were the extreme parts of it anything that our church taught. It felt like some powerful evil demon was telepathically projecting this into my mind. I was used to being whipped hard for things that didn't really make sense, but they were over in a few minutes. This mental torture just wouldn't let up. After a week of being able to barely eat or sleep right, I finally talked to my parents and prayed the sinner's prayer. It took the edge off, but it didn't bring the total peace that the preachers claimed. Because of this experience, I do have sympathy for people with mental illness who make a Christian commitment under extreme emotional duress. I still struggle with Christian conviction a lot, even though I don't think it makes any sense. As I mentioned, we moved to a new church in 1990 when I was 12. My father was ordained minister that year in Altamont. However, due to the typical partisan issues, one of our sister churches in Mount Hermon, Kentucky, near Glasgow, was having trouble keeping itself together, so they asked the church in Altamont for help. My father was nominated and commissioned to move to Kentucky to provide order and stability. So that's how I got to this part of the country. You probably wonder what my experience was in relation to sexual abuse, since that is reportedly quite common in Amish and Mennonite settings. Although some of my peers had issues with that, our family didn't. Except, which is worse, death from drowning or thirst? Our family was almost totally cut off from anything remotely sexual. I was hardly allowed to sit on my mother's lap after I was 3 or 4 because I might feel her breasts and have sexual temptations from the memories of it once I was older. We were taught that self-pleasure was a sin that was in danger of sending us to hellfire forever. Every 6 months, the ministers would interrogate us to see if we were living a holy life. If you admitted failure but weren't sorry for it, they would expel you and ostracize you socially. If you were sorry for it, you still had to make public confession to the rest of the church. If you were caught lying about it, you would get disciplined for that too. Once I got into my teens, I would fight intense temptation for a couple hours every night until I fell asleep out of mental exhaustion. Since I already struggled with some chronic fatigue, a couple years of such extreme sexual repression broke my health down to where I couldn't work at all. My father was at least understanding on that point and let me off from the daily chores. I feel like I've never gotten my physical stamina back from that. On the positive side, my father was moderately intelligent. He learned Einstein's laws of relativity and taught them to me. I found that very interesting. He also liked to design and build some of his own farm machinery, including several of his own feed mixers for our dairy farm. When I was older, I got into feed mixer sales and service myself. I also built a couple prototype machines. So that's the first feed mixer I built. I pretty much built it from scratch. I bought the axles and the ladder stand, but the rest of it I built and designed the whole thing. That's what the auger looks like inside. That's a machine you can dump whole big round bales of hay in there, and those knives on there will cut it up, and you put all your grain and feed ingredients in there, and it blends it all up. And this was my second prototype. And that's actually Dr. Fred Gott's farm and his tractor I used to try it out. Before I leave an overly negative picture of my parents, I would like to say that I've always felt loved and wanted by them. They practically never whipped erratically or in anger. They would always sit me down first and explain why they were doing it, and it was usually fairly consistent from one time to another, so there was a high degree of predictability. That in itself messes with my mind, though. How can someone be so loving, fair, and sensible in some ways, and so totally irrational in others? Another positive thing I feel like I got from my upbringing is a sense of other dimensions outside the physical. While I am categorically opposed to the religious notion that we owe our existence or absolute commitment to an infinite being, I find the awareness that we live in an infinite universe with worlds of complex life and intelligent species on other planets, in other galaxies, or even parallel realities to add wonder and interest to life. I have been very curious about the paranormal, extraterrestrials, flying saucers, etc., from as young as I can remember. So, how did I part ways with the Mennonites? I wanted to get married. I really liked this girl from the first time I saw her walk in the door when I was 14. We weren't allowed to date until we were 19, and with my health and financial issues, it took me a few more years till I was ready. When I finally asked her father for permission, as was standard procedure, he said that she was scared skinny of anyone marrying her and then moving her off to another church. At the time, I wasn't thinking I wanted to leave, but I had serious questions I wanted resolved if I wanted to be sure I was going to stay. My concerns mostly revolved around the fact that our church claimed to live under the influence of the Spirit as taught by the New Testament, but they actually governed the church in a very letter-of-the-law Old Testament manner. Jesus clearly emphasized that the law was made for man, not man for the law. Even though I believe Apostle Paul was a horrible authoritarian, he qualified some of his own writings as just his own opinion and not actually authorized by God. Our church contradicted the New Testament itself by claiming that every single word of Apostle Paul's writings were the unqualified inspiration of God. I wrote a 60-page letter to the bishop addressing these things. In hindsight, that seems pretty foolish. Any competent person should be able to easily point out any number of fundamental inconsistencies with no more than a half a dozen pages. At any rate, the bishop called a business meeting to put my membership on probation without even sitting down to discuss things first. I didn't quite trust our church, but I didn't know they would pull a stunt like that. I literally cried from the shock of it and was just in daze for a few days afterwards. Things just went downhill from there. They started trying to micromanage my personal life and business. At the time, I was trading close to $1 million worth of farm equipment a year around Kentucky and Tennessee. They wanted me to stop selling new feed mixers and to quit using an electronic Palm Pilot to manage my contacts, as well as get rid of my electronic word processor. I'm guessing that was so I couldn't write 60-page letters to the bishop. What bothered me more than their extreme demands is that they didn't seem interested in discussing how to make this work realistically with my budget and my health needs. It felt like they were trying to force me into absolute submission rather than coordinate a practical compromise. Every month that passed, I felt weaker and more pitiful. It literally felt like I was going to die within 9 months if I did what they wanted. I decided I didn't want to die in that situation or that young, so I didn't comply, and they expelled me. I had also said that I was only comfortably certain that God existed rather than being absolutely sure of it. So the actual charge at my expulsion was that I didn't have a true faith in God. That was the fall of 2006. But it wasn't easy dealing with the excommunication either, because at the time I was still living at home, and my father and brother were helping me with the feed mixer business, which all had to stop with the shunning. My younger sister Frida also died from complications of lupus over that time. That, coupled with the fact that my romance wasn't working out, not being able to keep the business going, needing to get used to American culture outside the church, and always struggling with a lot of physical fatigue, it was all just really hard. I ended up in the hospital on the 6th floor at the medical center here in Bowling Green because of suicidal depression for a few weeks in the fall of 2008. I could tell several more dramatic stories about this transition time, but I'm running out of time, so I'll tell you how I ended up here. In the summer of 2007, I visited different other churches such as Baptist, Church of Christ, etc. If I closed my eyes, they felt pretty much identical to sitting in a Mennonite church. A neighbor at the time was driving to Bowling Green to the UU church and invited me to come along. I found myself agreeing with most of their beliefs. In fact, once out of curiosity, I took an online quiz to see what religious denomination I fit. The results said that I was 100% aligned with the official position of the Unitarian Universalists. While I didn't know that UUs even had an official position, I was pleasantly surprised. I kind of doubt most UUs would score that high. But in spite of finding myself in so much philosophical agreement, I do really miss the Mennonite culture I grew up with and struggle to feel as much at home here as I wish. Some of that is changing gradually. I've been around town for close to 15 years now, and I'm gradually finding more people that I feel connected to. I would like to publicly thank Greg and Forrest, as well as Tim and Elizabeth, for welcoming me into their homes. Elizabeth especially supported me like a big sister through some really hard times. Interestingly, the very first time I came to church by myself, Greg invited me to lunch with Forrest, Tim, and Elizabeth. Many years later, I still spend a lot of time with all of them. The same thing could be said for Dr. Fred Gott. About the second time I visited here, he also invited me out to his farm, and I still spend a lot of time with him. So you might wonder what I've learned from my life. Generally, I would say if there is a true evil in this world, it is coercive religion. While I personally like a well-organized culture, I think it should be voluntary, with discipline only being administered if someone chooses to stay but won't cooperate with the democratic process. Can more be done to prevent child abuse? I have been slow to involve Child Protective Services because though they claim to be getting involved for the child's welfare, don't they often forcefully take the children out of the home? Even if the home is bad, shouldn't the children be given the choice about staying? Foster homes don't have a particularly great reputation either, do they? Wouldn't it be less stressful to be abused in a predictable way by someone you knew than in an uncertain way by a stranger? I don't have all the answers, but feel like our society is so systemically riddled with these issues that it's mostly an individual personal journey to be more consistent ourselves and gradually work towards creating more decent family relationships. I'm sorry I don't have a more instant turnkey solution. In closing, I won't say whether or not I have purposely gone over time to demonstrate to you how long our 2.5-hour church services were. But in case you're getting bored, that is just an integral part of a presentation on growing up Mennonite. I also want to thank Laura McGee for coordinating the service today, as well as coaching my presentation. Just having this talk brought up a lot of very mixed feelings for me. I reached out to her for some support, and she actually invited me to her home for dinner one evening. That was so helpful. I appreciate all of your continued support for Barrett and Company as I walk this journey.
What a gift. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. All right. Are you going to be around after the service for people who want to talk with you more? Okay, that's wonderful. Okay. At this time, we move to our offertory. This congregation and the work that we do is supported by the voluntary generosity of all who contribute. The offering is the sacrament of the free church. You may place your donation in the plate or use the QR code on the screen, or donate by way of our website. As we enjoy the music, the offering will be given and received in grateful appreciation of our shared hopes and values.
I think Tim said something about infidels. And I was talking with a language partner this morning, and I was telling him about this song that I was doing. He says, "Is anybody going to be offended?" And I says, "Only if I do it right." Y'all know the refrain to this. Surely you do. And if you do, please sing along. And this is the refrain. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. Well, we will pray with Aphrodite. Have you seen her, God Almighty, when she wears that see-through nightie? It's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. We will pray with Zarathustra. We will pray just like we used to. I'm a Zarathustra booster, and it's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. We will pray to those old druids. You know they drank fermented fluids and waltzed naked through the woods, and that's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. We'll do dances to bring water, bring our dogs and cats for slaughter, sacrifice our sons and daughters, and that's good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. I'll rise up in early morning when my God gives me her warning that a solar age is dawning. That'll be good enough for me. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. It's good enough for me. Thank y'all.
Thank you for these gifts. May we use them wisely in the service of this congregation and the community. So we have a couple of announcements, items of community news. I would ask Natalie Barman to come up and share her announcement, and after that, I have one from Diane.
I have two announcements this morning. One is from last week. This is a sign-up sheet for the tour of the Sikh Museum in Russellville. You have that on there. We're going to tour the museum. It starts with the Master's House, and then we go down into what's called the Bottom, and we visit other homes and learn about Black history in Russellville. So I have a sign-up sheet. That is next Saturday, okay? The 6th of September, if I'm right. 7th? Yeah, I think the 7th is right. I had it wrong on the last sheet, so anyway, okay. Next Saturday for sure. What we'll be doing is meeting here at the church at 10 for those who would like to carpool. And I think there are a number of people who have offered to drive, so we'll just put some carpools together. If you're going to drive yourself to Russellville, I do have directions. I can give you that today. The second announcement is that there are a few of us in this church. Diane is here, Diane Lewis, and Lisa DePorto and myself. We are part of Kujan. which is our Kentucky UU Justice Action Network. Okay, a long title. But what we're doing, we did this last year, and what we're doing again this year is writing postcards to Kentucky registered citizens, voters. We are nonpartisan as a church, right? So we do not support a candidate, but we're encouraging people to vote. So we actually have 500 of these cards, folks. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're in packets of 20, and you're given an address that you put on there, and then some suggested things to write on the back. We're going to be meeting over in the fellowship hall after service, that we can either get started writing some of the cards together there, or you're welcome to take a packet home. The other thing, I didn't bring my pickle jar up, but nowadays, I don't know if you know, but it's almost 50 cents a postcard, which sounds outrageous when you used to think of it as 3 cents a postcard to mail. So we also will be taking donations for, if you don't want to write, but you could spare a couple of dollars, I will also be collecting money for postage. Thank you. See you later.
Diane, would you come up, or would that work? Oh, you want me to bring you a mic?
No, it's fine. I can speak loud.
Oh, here you go.
The 14th was up there also as the plant sale. Now, you want to put that back? There we go. So, please see Michelle about wild ones.
Okay, I'm speaking about the 21st Pride celebration. We've always been a Pride sponsor. We are again. I've got a sign-up sheet I'll put outside. I need about 2 to 3 people for each shift. It runs from 12 to 5, but I'd like a shift from 11 to 1, one from 1 to 3, and another from 3 to 5. So if you can help with that, we need help with setup and takedown as well. And then finally, poll workers are still desperately needed in Warren County. I have signed up for all 4 days. So if anybody has that time, please help. Thank you.
So, a moment about membership. If you have questions about Unitarian Universalism or about joining this congregation, please speak to someone on our membership team. Could membership team members raise their hands and hold them up for a moment? You can see who those are. Okay. You can also speak to our board president, who is here today. Right back there. Or email her. At president@uubgky.org. You may find out more about us by including community news by reading our weekly email updates, by looking at our bulletin board, and by following us on Facebook, YouTube, and reading the website. So at this time, we have a hymn. No? Okay. All right. So we are going to move on to say farewell to our virtual friends and close the live stream. We bid farewell to those who have joined us online. We hope that you found this service meaningful. We invite you to join us again. Be well and go in peace.